People think certain amplifiers, quote, fight impedance rise. And you don't want to fight it. Impedance rise is your friend, you know, and the more rise you have, the more efficient your enclosure is. And it all depends. And your rise is all over the place. It's not just one, you know, oh, it's rising times 2. It's not like that all over the place. Now, if you're an SPL competitor, sure, you're looking at one frequency. The rest don't really matter. But for your average bass head guy, it's going to be all over the place. I think the misconception always has come from, you know, slash amplifiers, aka the JL slash. Now you have the Teraamp Smart series, and of course the KXA 2400 that's loosely regulated, a regulated power supply, but that's not even really what that does. That's a little bit different, because it does do more power at 1 ohm and by a few hundred watts or more. Just go check out the Big D amp dyno of the KXA 2400 and you'll see what I'm talking about. But with like the JL Slash and the Teraamp Smart 3K that literally only do 3K or 1000 respectively at 1, 2, or 4 ohms, give or take, you know, it depends what we're talking about here, but they do the same at the different impedances. And that is kind of helping you so that you can wire lower, you know, that's really about it. And so you're not blowing the internals. Really, the board is a 2 ohm board if it's going to do 3K at 1 ohm and 2 ohm. So there's a lot that goes into it. Amplifiers don't fight rise. It's just the amplifier's built in a different way so that it can withstand and just still deliver the power at maybe a lower starting in resistance, you know, your initial load, you know, when you hook up your woofers, 4 ohm, you got 2 ohm, your starting load, so you can wire that a little bit lower. But even then, they do not fight impedance rise. Impedance rise is your friend, it really is. And if you don't have too much of it, usually it means the enclosure isn't really working too well. It's not creating pressure inside, however that works. Stuff like that happens all the time. And I understand where, you know, these rumors or legends come from, you know, fighting rise, fighting impedance curve. It's not like that. It really is not. The cool thing about the KXA 2400.1 is, yeah, it'll do around the same power at 2 and 1 ohm, but not really. It still does 3,500 watts at 1, 24 at 2, and 1,200 at 4. That sounds like any other amplifier. The difference between the KXA 2400 and a lot of other amplifiers is that loosely regulated power supply, just so that it still does rated at 2 ohms at 12 volts, as it does at 14 volts. A lot of amplifiers, you're going to drop. You know, at 12 volts, it's probably going to do 19 or 2,000 compared to 2,400, you know, rated. And it's not going to do a crazy amount over at 14 volts. That's the difference. It's still going to do 2,400 watts. So once you get your electrical right, it's not like, oh, this amp's going to do 2,800 watts. It's just going to do what it's rated to do. And hey, it's pretty cool. It actually pulls more current. So it still does that power at 12 volts, 11 volts. It's pretty crazy. Now, everything within reason, but it definitely helps. How far does the port loading wall need to be, kind of deal? That's a good question. You know, whenever you're talking about boundary loading, and when I say boundary loading, I'm talking when you have your woofer in your trunk and it's firing backwards and reflecting off of something. I learned about boundary loading, or, you know, port loading. It's the same thing when I was a kid. If you've ever messed with your dad's stereo or your own at some point, and you put the speaker in the corner, you know, it gets a little boomier. And you put it too close, it really doesn't make a difference. Might get a little quieter. You pull it back too far, it's not as loud. And I feel like that's more boundary loading than port loading. When you design a box, you want to design it in a way where the port, quote, doesn't need to have any external resistance on the outside. You want to design it within WinZid or any kind of box designing feature program so that it works as it sits, you know, like that's the way it's going to be. And when you get into SPL, sure, you're looking at the vehicle, you're looking at the direction, you're looking at how far you have it separated. But to the average person, whenever you're just putting it in your car, there's a rule of thumb, and I hate rules of thumb, but it's the easiest way to explain it, of how far does it need to be. A lot of people say, you know, like the radius of the driver, the radius of the port, you know, just half the diameter of it away from the loading wall per se. Like, you know, wherever it's fired into. If it's firing back, it would be the back of your trunk. If it's firing to the side of your car. And there's a lot of variables, but it kind of gives you an idea. If you have it too close and the subwoofer is this far away or the port's this far away and your port's this big, it's not going to work the way it's supposed to. So that's kind of the rule of thumb where you give whatever. The best way to do it is try moving it around. Put it a little bit, you know, 6 inches away, give or take. Play a couple songs. Move it back. Move it back. Move. Okay, it sounded a little washy. Let me pull it forward rather than back. There we go. We're good to go. That's the way you do it to figure out how far it should be. Thanks for tuning in again. Did Kicker have to compromise some of the sound quality on the Solo X to get the extra output compared to the Q class? And, you know, I am pretty sure that it does, man. You look at it, and the driver is just this thick surround. You know what I'm saying? Like, this thing is just beefy. You know, so when you have more moving mass, as in more just speaker, you know, just not even talking about the suspension so everything stays straight because all that weight on top, but you just have more mass because the surround's bigger so that it moves farther like the L7X Solo X does. So whenever you have that, that driver's going to have a little bit harder time of, you know, with the just, I wouldn't even say back EMF, because I've been down this road recently with back EMF. You know, when you bounce a ball and it bounces back up, that's kind of like back EMF, electrical motor force, and how a speaker has suspension. What I'm trying to get at is the transience of just that reaction. You're just moving more mass, period. Like a bigger guy, you think he's going to be able to jab as fast as, like, you know, somebody that's smaller, you know, just physics. You're moving more. So you might run into an SQ difference for sure. But, you know, with Kicker and how they design stuff, you know, I was a little hesitant. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Whenever this L7X came out, I'm like, I don't want it to be like the other ones out there, the American Bass, the Sundown, the DC, just big brute things that are just inefficient, and they move a lot of air and they don't sound good per se. For what, you know, the average bass head, not just guy playing 30, 20 hertz, just wind 160s plus. I'm talking like an SQer side of things, the average bass head. And that's kind of what it is. It has that sound where it'll still play up into the 60, 70 hertz range. It may not be as accurate and SQ oriented as a Comp Q or even an L7S or R, but it has more potential in other aspects that those do not. Catch the Livin Loud with Andy show every Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 or 10 o'clock Eastern. Smash the like and subscribe.